Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the main event.
Let's go.
Round one. Fight.
Thank you for tuning in to the Crypto Street Podcast. Here are your hosts, Killer Whale, Prince, and Crypto Dale.
And remember to tip your waitress.
Hey everyone, welcome to Crypto Street Podcast. This is Crypto Dale coming to you from Canada. I got loud back in, sitting next to my man Prince. How's it going, buddy?
What's up? Not too bad. If you guys want a weather report, again, snow is kind of melting. Not a bad day. Sun was out. I actually was kind of chipping at ice in my shorts.
No, you weren't.
Yeah, I was. I was quite a scene. But you know, the snow is still.
I'd love to see what a grizzly bear looks like with shorts on.
Prince, do you have really, really hairy legs?
Yeah, I'm a beast. I'm an
Guaranteed.
animal.
10 out of
I
10.
figured.
I'm an animal. Like,
If he ever goes to shave his chest, he has to get the hedge clippers.
I don't shave.
Or
Who
the
does
weed
that?
eater, as the Canadian.
Who does that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Turn it up. Yeah.
But you can't shave your chest,
Yeah,
right?
it would be an event, and I just don't want to go through that. So.
Shoulders back. You could weave an Indian blanket, couldn't you?
Oh. You know what that reminds me of?
It-
My gym has like a bunch of really, really big time steroid users, and they all have like this crazy shoulder hair that's just like out of this world. And I think it's from all the testosterone. They're just growing hair everywhere.
Totally.
Gnarly.
It has to be. So, Killer, what's good?
Not too much, man. I'm excited for this weekend. Taking a wee little trip to Chicago, the Windy City. Check the weather forecast there. It's going to be cold as hail. But that'll be a very fun trip. Going to meet up with some crypto peeps. Have a good time for St. Patty's Day. And by the time everybody hears this, it might be after St. Patty's. But so we'll see. It'll be fun.
For people listening, this is Dale. I am one of those people that is meeting up with Killer.
Yeah.
We've got a nice little crew assembled there that's going to meet up, and Killer's going to get a taste of the Midwestern life that two people on the podcast tonight are fortunate enough. The Ledger Status is our guest tonight, and we were kind of talking yesterday that we feel the Midwestern boys, men, and the Southern men are quite similar in many facets of life. So Ledger, welcome, man. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys.
So we kind of just start out with a little background on yourself. How'd you get into crypto? Just kind of high level view of yourself. Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I've listened to a lot of your episodes, and it's funny how many people, both guests and I know some of y'all that got in for the first time, kind of late spring 2017. Catching some phase of that Ethereum pump that it must have just made a news cycle that I don't really remember and hit mainstream again because like a lot of people, I'd heard of Bitcoin for years and for whatever reason, never pulled the trigger. Several friends that were in it. I found out later that I had some friends that had Bitcoin like sub $100 and they didn't evangelize it to me. And I'm really pissed about that. So I hold that over their head now. But I scaled in fiat over the course of really about 6 months. But my first buy, I think it was in May, like early May, like really mid pump of Ethereum. Like I was probably buying Killer's like first sells of Ethereum. That was me at the time. So, and then, just dug in from there. And my last big round of fiat was that big September dip. So, I was really scaling in fiat over the course of months and months, trying to catch anytime Bitcoin was catching the dip. So I was all about that China FUD and everything else. That was great for me to be able to catch cheap Bitcoin and then go on and learn all my hard lessons in the altcoin market. So 2017 entrant, just like a lot of other people, and quickly found the community elements of it and haven't looked back.
It's kind of cool seeing the people that have entered in 2017, like you and myself. A lot of them have blown up. Ledger, like you, and Gat and Luke to come to mind. It's really cool seeing guys like yourself get in 17 and really have the impact like you guys have had on this space already in a short time.
Yeah, and it's been a lot of fun. I have been investing in stocks since I was like 15 years old. My dad he gave me a significant amount of money for a 15-year-old, but it was less than $1,000, like maybe 800 or $1,000, something like that. And that's a lot of money for a kid, but his prerequisite was you can do whatever you want as long as you're investing this money. So I was investing in the stock market through high school, through college, and then I cashed out most of that as I was finishing college to like finish with those types of expenses and whatnot. But I learned the basics of investing. Like I just remember doing like stuff with Bollinger Bands and stuff as a teenager, which is funny. Now seeing John Bollinger in crypto. So that was a good like test bed for understanding the basics of investing as a kid. And I dug in fairly deep at the time. And then when I entered the job market, I'd cashed out for paying for things and then entered the job market when the stock market was wrecked. So now I've had a 10-year bull cycle in the regular stock market leading up into crypto. So it's been a fortunate path for me, I guess, to just the way the timing worked. But so I do come into investing in crypto with some knowledge of markets. And I think that's been valuable for me because a lot of people that get in this space, like they don't know anything about how anything works in terms of investing. Like the very basic questions you just get constantly in DMs, and it's crazy. Like I get questions of people that know how to buy crypto, and they're like, "Hey man, where do I buy stocks?" Because I bought I show like a chart of a traditional stock, and it's crazy. It just blows my mind.
What an awesome thing for your dad to do to get you involved that early.
Yeah, that's so cool.
That's such a smart thing.
Say, like,
if I have a kid, I'm definitely
more
gonna do
kids
that.
should have that.
Yeah, because I mean, I see it all the time, man. You see like 40-year-olds or 50-year-olds where they're like, or not that 40's older, but you see like 50-year-olds, 60-year-olds, and they're like, "Oh, it's about time I save for retirement, right?" It's like, oh, that time was 30 years ago. Like, so the fact that you got started at 15.
Learning that concept that money can work for you and maybe make you more money with that money at such a young age, like that's so key. Like that's huge.
Yeah, and I think that's something that he was experiencing himself, like this guy in his 40s, and he's starting to think more seriously about retirement. And at the time, like he was realizing how much catch up he was going to have to play because he wasn't doing the like finance 101 of how to save for retirement, for like the normie market, if you will. And he was figuring those things out. And so he wanted to make sure that we got as early a start as we could. So I'm super thankful that he did that because it gave me an understanding of going into your career, what you have to put aside. And especially when you count for inflation and all these other things that are, that happen in life, the amount of money that our generation, being like people in their 20s, 30s, there's people in this space that are in their teens, how much money our generation, this era, especially for Americans without pensions and, big government social programs, the amount of money we have to have set aside to be able to retire is baffling. And I think that's going to be a hidden crisis, 20, 30, 40 years from now.
Oh, yeah. And people are living longer, too, so they need more money to live out those other years, So as that increases, you just need to save more just for that, as life expectancy increases.
Yeah, it's pretty depressing. So thanks to the baby boomers.
Yeah, thanks, Mom and Dad.
Yeah.
Take that, I'll get you back. No, I think that's one reason, too, why I got into crypto was because I kind of felt that maybe that Social Security income won't be there when I'm ready to retire, and it's something that I don't want to have to stress about or think that will be able to rely on that. So very good point. So Ledger, you're kind of known as one of the key guys in this space, in my opinion, and I think these guys would echo that for the Ichimoku cloud. You and Carpe, in our opinion, are probably two on the forefront of that. So my question was, when did you start using that? Was it when you got into crypto, or was it when your dad gave you that money? And maybe talk about a little bit why that's one of your favorite indicators.
No, I didn't use the Ichimoku cloud system until crypto, and I learned about it from Josh. I'm literally his little acolyte, or whatever you call it, in terms of cloud indicators. And for me, it's something that allowed me to monitor a broad subset of assets and identify trends quickly. That's really what it's meant for. And then you can use that or a lot of other indicators or as plenty of people have said on y'all's podcasts and elsewhere, like the more experienced you get, in addition to that, the better you just get at identifying, where past congestion areas have been with order blocks and, establishment of these liquidity pools and using horizontal support and resistance. A lot of people are like, yeah, just use that. But really, I think you have to learn to use that. Like that's an art, even though it's the simplest tool is just drawing a horizontal line. You can draw a horizontal line to fit your bias pretty easily. You're like, you know what?
Yeah,
This is freaking bullish because look at this support that I just drew under where I want to buy it.
Parabolic Trav.
Right. So the cloud really prevents that. And that's why I think it's a really decent tool to catch the middle of the trend, because it's not going to show that it's bullish until the trend has been relatively established. And then it's going to give you hints that the trend is ending or is turning bearish or whatever, and essentially give you a way to conservatively enter and exit a trade, catch the middle of the trend, and try your best to not get destroyed buying and selling things that you shouldn't be buying and selling. And I found value in that. And so I use it as like the thing that's on the chart when I first start looking. But a lot of times I turn it off and, I'll draw patterns and I'll try to build my own alternative arguments, and then I'll see how that lines up with what the cloud's showing me. Like, where's the Keynesian? That's telling me where this has support if it's overextended. And the price will ride the Tinkin on the trend. Like that's the quick indicator. And where is there significant resistance if the cloud is thick? Like it's just telling you stuff. And I found that useful, but it's not a replacement for understanding price action. It's just, it allows you to be lazy. To add to all those things, like when I was looking deeply into crypto, and I did more fundamental trades probably in the early months of getting into crypto than later. And as I learned more about market cycles and the impact of Bitcoin's price on everything else's price, like it made no sense to me to not dig further into technical indicators. And my second son was born in the very early fall. So I was holding my infant in one arm and I was on my phone at 2 a.m. in the other arm. So I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to look at crypto charts to stay awake. And it was, it's the type of thing that can keep you awake. So I would stare at charts, and then I was like, man, I was like, I need a Twitter account where I can put this stuff up. So I created a Twitter account, and that's where this all started. And looking at something where the chart is drawn for you because it's got the cloud applied to it, or moving averages, or anything that's a pre-driven indicator that doesn't require me, fat fingering lines on a chart. And I would screenshot the chart and I would post it on Twitter. And that's really how I got started on crypto Twitter.
I feel like I remember you talking about that one time in the pod, how you were
definitely do. Yeah.
holding your son and looking at your phone in the other eye. That sticks out to me. That's kind of fun.
Yeah, and I always really appreciated you doing the pod too, because when we started the pod, well, maybe even more so now, but it was like, for lack of a better word, kind of a shit show. Just like a massive, just like ridiculous memes and everything. And then you'd have like Ledger and Cache just like posting really good charts. And I was like, thank God these guys are here. Otherwise, there would be no reason to be in this group at all. So, like, I always remember you being the go-to guy for that. So it's interesting to see how fast your Twitter following has grown too.
It's blown up.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, I started a good 5 months prior, and you're way ahead.
I remember telling people when, trying to recruit the bigger accounts or whatever, being like, well, Ledger status is in there, and he posts a lot of his charts in there first before his Twitter. So
yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's valuable to have somewhere to bounce ideas off of. And, if you're just throwing something up and it's nothing but the Ichimoku cloud on there, you don't do any analysis necessarily. You're just essentially taking a screenshot for someone. But if you're trying to decide how am I going to act based on these indicators, then I think it's really valuable to have people to bounce that off of. And sometimes that's a small audience. And I think a lot of us have a smaller chat where you can have more in-depth conversations, where you might have the more personal touch of I'm considering a particular portion of my portfolio on this trade because of my level of confidence on it. And then there's a broader chat where you can sometimes just have this in-depth conversation that has its mix of serious talk and non-serious talk. just about what the market's feeling, and there's a lot of value to having those conversations beyond crypto Twitter. And, now that more and more people are shadow banned or doxed off Twitter and all this stuff that's going on, it's just crazy. So I'm an advocate for getting involved in Telegram or any avenue like that where you can have a better and more in-depth conversation.
How do you decide how much to put in a certain trade? What kind of guides that? Is it based on how much you like the coin? I'm sure that's part of it, but how do you kind of come to that number?
So that's really something I've been evolving on, where I'm becoming more confident putting a larger percentage of my overall portfolio in a single trade, but then giving myself a shorter leash to get wrecked on, if that makes sense. Because the volatility in the crypto market is just freaking massive, and for a good trader, that's can be an advantage. But for any trader, that's also a little bit gut wrenching sometimes. And when the trend is against you, and if you're not on margin or in a position to short, then you're basically looking for options to go long. And if you're playing altcoins and you're not going between cash and Bitcoin, I think a lot of people are doing that, probably more than they should. Then you're essentially trying to find where's my bullish setup. And you need to be able to be willing to cut that trade a lot quicker, and that requires monitoring it. So, if you're going to do risk management in it, you either have to buy when it's terrible, when it feels like crap. Right now, the market freaking sucks. Nobody likes the altcoin market right now. And smart traders are probably smart traders that are investing in altcoins are probably just licking their chops right now. Dumb traders, and I totally bulk myself in with dumb traders the majority of the time. We were man, this altcoin market's so juicy a month ago, and it's oh, lo and behold, there's another 30% gone. So you have to wait it out,
So true.
So I think if you're gonna buy a trend, you need to have preset as much as possible. And this is a very difficult discipline. I'm not saying I'm perfect at it. I was just telling a friend, I'm totally married to my Ubik bag, have been since last summer. It's ridiculous. But for the most part, if you're going to enter a trade, you have to have a support and resistance. And you have to say, I'm willing to risk 10% of a loss. And if you're going to risk 2% of your portfolio, whatever, on the downside, for the potential gain of, say, 30, 40, 50% on the upside, and just say okay, when it hits one of these two things, is that worth the trade? And if it's not worth the trade, then you don't make the trade. If it's worth the trade, then you take the risk, but then you have to have discipline when you're setting those orders. And that's the best way to retain your initial capital. And where most people get messed up in this space, myself included, I can't even count how many times I've made these mistakes, is you essentially give yourself leeway to make mistakes and then just wait for the pump to cover for yourself. And, thank goodness we had December and January, because I got into some alts way too early and had to live through October and November. And there's a whole new generation doing that right now. So the more people we can express discipline in trading and get that point across to them, the better it will be. And it takes lessons, and it takes losing money a couple times to do it, I think.
Yeah. That's the crappy part of the market is, the best education that you're going to get within the market is typically losing a chunk of money. Because it sucks and it's
or
painful.
at least a chunk of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And that gets to the dollar versus Bitcoin debate, which I have a lot of thoughts on, because I know some people talk about the dollar a lot, and I do think it's extremely valuable. And I think there were a lot of hints on the dollar charts that this altcoin winter was on the way well before most people realized it. So despite a lot of people that will tell you just look at your Bitcoin value, I would advise someone, before you get into a trade, go type in the USD pair as well into TradingView, and you can make your decision to enter the trade on the Bitcoin chart. But just keep an eye on the US dollar value too, because you might be a little more overextended than you thought. And I saw a lot of charts that hit the 4.236 fib extension off their breakouts on the US dollar chart. And that's unheard of in a traditional market. you're lucky if you hit a 1.618. And this is like, this is the moon. Like people hit the moon on those dollar charts. And they're like, well, when's the moon on the Bitcoin chart? And then now, now they're wondering why they're wrecked. And it's like, man, it was there. It was there. You just weren't looking.
Yeah.
You
And
missed it.
yeah. So it's almost like the dollar chart at times can work the way RSI works to show you how overbought something is. And I would just challenge people, go look at some altcoins and what their dollar charts were. And the pumps that we had.
You posted a chart of Doge.
Yeah,
Just
Doge.
the dollar chart on Doge.
Yeah, Doge hit like 2
Just
cents. It's like Doge to a penny was a joke because it was so high, and it hit 2 pennies.
And the thing is too, like almost every new person to the space starts out looking at the dollar charts because it's easier, it's simpler, it's what they know. They know, it's a solid sort of benchmark. Whereas Bitcoin, there's a lot more to consider. You're considering two things: not only what is the alt going to do, but what's Bitcoin going to do at the same time. And it just goes to speak to how complicated all of this stuff is. And setting up a trade or choosing to pull the trigger on a trade is like a decision, or it's kind of the result of so many different factors, whether it be Ichimoku and then moving averages, Fibonacci lines like you were talking about. And you really have to consider all of these things. And even if you consider all of those things, it's still just a probability sort of thing. You're not saying, oh, all the indicators hit, so this is for sure going to be a winning trade.
No.
And there's so much you have to think about. And that's why trading is hard.
Especially in this market now. This market has evolved so quickly. It's just this past few months, like really. And when I say it's evolved, I'm really talking about the price action on Bitcoin now. Like it's vicious, it's not like it was 3 months ago. Now we get swings that are bigger. It's just chop, right? They call it chop. And it's turned into more of a Forex style market now. So it's fun to see how it's evolving, but it's gotten a lot harder,
Yeah. And there are a lot of partial truths that I think that people identify from a Twitter account or whatever it is, where they're looking for a 10x. And I think if sometimes people, if they look at an opportunity and they say, maybe I can make 30% here. 30% on a traditional market trade is freaking great. I just closed a trade today that was 18% in the traditional market in 2 weeks. And that's like, the traditional market's off its rocker. Yeah, the traditional market's off its rocker making that kind of trade. And I think we're going to have to more and more look at the trends in the altcoin market. And other than when it's, alt season, like everything just pumps and goes crazy, or like some random coin goes on a mega run, the day-to-day trading, you either have to have a strategy where you're buying, like y'all have had Need a Coin and Not So Fast. Theirs is a different strategy. They're earlier than you. They're mining their own bag. They have these things that's going to allow them to buy it when it's cheaper than you'll ever see it. You'll never even know this project existed yet. And they're getting those, and they can wait it out. Like they don't care when it's going on a dump like this because they got it at 100 sats. You bought it at 1,000. Now it's at 500. They don't care. You care because you're destroyed on it. So I think the better move is to either get like that and be able to be early on a project and find it when it's either depressed but still has the right fundamentals, or you look for a trade and you be a trader. You don't be like buy something early on the case of fundamentals and then you just have hopium that it's going to 10x or 100x for you, because that's not the way that you're going to make money. And I think there's a lot of misconception out there in terms of the type of returns you can expect when it's just a trade and it's not either this incredible outflow from Bitcoin into altcoins and everything 5x's, or like some other off the wall scenario. For the most part, you're getting additional volatility that doesn't exist in the regular market, but you still have to be a trader, and that's a harder job.
Yeah, it is. I think a big thing, and especially with this given market that we've seen now, is because leading up to before the new year and stuff back 2017, it was very easy where if you didn't, like, you could always be in a position in a sense, right? It didn't matter because the market was so strong. You could be holding nothing but crypto and you were just going to be making money over the long run anyways. Now we're given a market that's a lot tougher. And I think we've seen a lot of people have to kind of learn that, you don't always need to be in a position. You can chill out, right? And just kind of watch, wait for your setup to come. And so I think, if anything, this has been a really tough market for a lot of people, but a big thing I think, and I'm hoping, is it's going to kind of teach a little bit of patience and discipline, because like you've said too, like the patience and discipline, it's so big, because the bull run, nobody's got any of that anymore, right?
Yeah.
Everything's coming so quick, so easy.
Yeah, you want to pull 30, 40, 50% in a day.
Yeah. There's a saying that not having a position is a position, because you're still making the choice not to open up a long or a short. So that's still a decision.
Mm-hmm. It saved my butt, like big time, where I'm not scared to just sit into cash if I want to, because, and there's a lot of people who are, they refuse to go into cash. Maybe it's because they want to hide from the tax man, whatever it so be it. But to me, there is some value to be had in being able to go into cash. So.
Yeah. And if you're sick of your Bitcoin value going down, the best way to solve that is to be in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And if you're sick of your dollar value going down, it's the best solution to that is to be in the dollar or the Canadian dollar.
Yeah. Exactly. There we go.
What are your thoughts on alt season and maybe where we are in relation to it, how close it may be? I mean, we've all been hearing on Twitter for probably a solid 7 months at this point that alt season's back or it's right around the corner. And then it's always like the date gets pushed back like a month when it doesn't happen too, because in February, alt season was going to be back in February. And then in March, if alt season's going to be back in March. And if it doesn't happen in March, alt season's going to be back in April. And it's like, I think everyone's
we'll get a string of 2 good days, and then everybody's off their rocker.
And I'm so guilty of this too, because like alts would show like a little bit of strength and Bitcoin like a little bit of weakness, and I'd be like, it feels like alt season, guys. I was here right before the last alt season. I remember tweeting this too, and I feel like an idiot. Obviously,
I saw someone today say, "I can't wait for April and alt season." I about threw up.
Not again.
That was my buddy, Crypto Messiah. So we actually live in the same town, and we've got to know each other. And I think sometimes we disagree on things.
He's a good dude. I like him.
Oh, he's a great guy, and he's done really well in the market.
Yeah.
I think he and I may be in a little bit of a disagreement, though, in terms of when's the next time that we'll see alts gain a significant amount of value relative to Bitcoin. And this is something I've been developing recently, so I could be wrong on. In general, I think it's unwise to look at December and January as not having been an alt season. It looks like a small pump on the Bitcoin charts. If you go to the dollar charts, it was so much bigger than the summer pumps were. Like look at Strat, for instance. Look at Waves. Some of those,
right? Their
Bitcoin values never got to all-time highs, but their dollar values were triple their prior all-time highs or something like that. People were talking about Strat being $50 a coin. Well, it went from like 3 to 22 or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but and I think that's just worth keeping into consideration. That alt season could have been December and January, and in February, people were saying, "When is alt season?" And if that was true, I'm just saying if that was true, then the period after that is a significant accumulation period, meaning I don't know how well they'll retain against Bitcoin. Maybe they'll stay flat. Like I have some alts that I've maintained because I watched them rise and I watched them fall, and I maintained them in my portfolio, and therefore 20 or 30% of my overall portfolio is just this wrecked collection of altcoins that are still wrecked, and they may be continued to be wrecked for another couple of months, and maybe they'll bleed slowly, maybe they'll bleed quickly. I don't know, but they're bad enough. They're in a nasty enough shape. They're just going to sit there until they pump, and I think that might take a while to do that accumulation period. Mm-hmm. And a healthy altcoin market is going to require a healthy Bitcoin market, in my opinion. And until we see a healthy Bitcoin market, the altcoin market will, I think, continue to bleed sans exit pumps or whatever you want to call them. I don't know. And I will give a caveat that a month from now, I could listen back to this and be like, holy crap, how bad was the market? He sounds so depressed. And this is some self-reflection that I've been doing because I'm, I left a period where I hit portfolio all-time highs, and then I let too much of it bleed, basically. And you get to a point where you're like, okay, I need to analyze what was my trading behavior and where did I go wrong. Mm-hmm. And what I'm seeing now is like we're entering from an altcoin perspective a period of potential prolonged accumulation relative to Bitcoin. I think the dollar values will follow along with Bitcoin, basically. But relative to Bitcoin, I think we're entering a period of prolonged accumulation, and we may not see another good alt pump index wide, like across the sector, until maybe like early to midsummer, potentially, assuming Bitcoin doesn't go in a full bear market. If anyone wants to be more depressed, we can crack another beer.
Yeah.
I'm of the kind of the same mindset, but I think it could get like quite ugly. I mean, if you look at the charts, I know everyone hates this 2013 comparison because the markets are a lot different than they were in 2013. There's a lot more legitimate projects, a lot more big capital in the markets, a lot more big capital about to enter the markets with all of the, easier on ramps for institutional money. But the charts look awfully similar. Like if you look at Bitcoin when it popped in 2013, it was bad. I mean, it looks very similar to when it popped this recent bubble. And the period after that, I mean, it was not like a big tank and then the market recovered in like a month or two. It was a solid like half a year to a year of just ugliness and bleeding. And I very well think that could be the case. I mean, I would be thrilled if we have another alt summer or late spring. I think that would be a great thing, obviously, but I wouldn't be too surprised if we go even further. And I think it's really hard for people to accept that because they don't want to think that, it doesn't make them happy. It's not a pleasing thought, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And again, I could look back on this too in a month and be like, oh, I was really depressed, and I am depressed about the markets right now. So maybe that's a bias. But I think what you said about Bitcoin strength and altcoin strength is so true because I remember during the last alt season, the way it would work was Bitcoin would go up a little bit, alts would go up a little bit. And they kind of had this ebb and flow, but they were all kind of climbing in, not at the same time, but they were taking turns climbing. Like one would go down, the other would go up, one would go down. But in general, the trend over a few month period at least was up. And I really think we're going to have to see that. So if Bitcoin is ugly, that does not necessarily mean that alts are going to be pretty.
Yeah, Bitcoin runs the market. That's something that we always got to remember. Bitcoin is king, and whatever health it is in is going to determine the health of our market. I think there's still a lot of ICOs too that they haven't really unloaded their supply that they've brought in, their contributions. It's been locked up. So there's, we want to look at potential things that could lead to selling pressure. Well, that's going to mainly be on Ethereum. But again, I think, and for the tokens in particular, they really do depend on Ethereum as well. So it's not just Bitcoin now. They're depending on both. But there's a lot of garbage. And I think we're starting to see it more and more now where people who were putting money into ICOs are now getting their money back and they're actually just sitting at a loss compared to what they put in during the ICO. And so I think this is maybe, like you said, this is going to be a period where there's going to be more accumulation. I think we're going to shake out some of the garbage within the market a bit, or try to anyways. But we'll see. I do think though, to me, it's an accumulation period. I don't know how soon we'll have an alt season. I would love it to happen, in the next month or so.
Oh, but, sure.
Realistically, I think you're pretty bang on when, we're going to enter an accumulation phase, and we're going to probably, leave some of the stragglers behind, some of the weaker projects, and maybe kind of just cleanse ourselves a little bit.
And I think that goes into a whole lot of fundamental factors that can help trigger that. One, let's look at it from two angles. One is the ICO market, and two is like the traditional altcoin pump market, things that have some chart history. The things that have chart history, like think of old Polo coins that have their cycles. Well, what happens if and when Circle delists like 80% of those off of Polo? Like that's going to essentially put the death on anything that has a security-like nature or isn't legit enough to be on something that's got FDIC insurance and that Circle and Goldman will put their name on. And then look at it from the other angle of the new project market and ICOs. When the returns don't show back up the way they showed up in 2017, the liquidity in the sense of getting Ethereum into those projects dies. And then the amount of money on the outflow looking to get out of existing profitable positions increases because you have investors that were looking at 3 to 5 year positions that are reducing their scope in terms of what they're willing to tolerate because the dollar values are down. And there's a lot of potential there for seeing how there can be a massive shakeup in the alts market. And essentially you have consolidation, but not in the price sense, but from the number of coins. So you start to see fundamentals play a more important factor, and the coins and the projects that are doing something are going to survive, and they'll get hurt too. And the ones that aren't doing something are going to die. And that's going to be a painful shakeout. And in terms of retail investors, the ones that are not going to be able to stick around are the ones that risked more than they could lose. And when their dollar value hits their break-even point, like think of the number of people that got in from $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 Bitcoin. When they hit their break-even point, or they lose 50%, whatever that number is, they're gone. And the natural selection in the market is going to want to get rid of that audience. And it's a painful period, but that's a crypto market cycle. Yeah, that's a cleansing. That's not an altcoin cycle. That's not that's a crypto global market cycle that is going to have to play out. And that'll be what sends the money into the hands of the few, being the patient institutional investors that are left, the people that have done their risk management and had been patient through the markets. Those will be the people that are left at the end of the day. And if you can survive that, then I think there's a ton of upside in the crypto space. But
crypto's proved it time and time again. Like if you can survive the real tough periods, because crypto's had some real tough periods in its past. I don't think people are always aware of that because there's just so many new people. And like you said, a lot of these people, they've never even touched stocks before, so they don't really know a whole lot about it. They just think there's a place to get some money going. But there's been some real ugly periods, and it's the individuals who, they were able to follow a game plan, sit tight, and, painful at some points, but they were able to just control themselves. And, then when the true, a huge alt season where, it didn't, everything moved, those guys were just laughing, right? And that was kind of their reward. So, yeah.
And I think the elimination of a lot of the garbage is actually a good thing long term, because the more coins there are, the more places there are to put money, and the less your returns are going to be in the actually good projects. So if we can kind of weed out a lot of this trash, I think the returns in the actual good, the legitimate projects that really do have staying power and long term value are going to be higher.
Yeah, I'm a huge advocate for weeding out the utility tokens that are only utility tokens because they call themselves that. And the eventual introduction of the security token, where we really do upend what equity in an organization means. Because when we buy a token now, most of us, even though it's a utility token, whatever, and we're buying into the network of the underlying token that's controlled by an organization, look at any of these projects that, this is what they're pitching. We're all kind of looking past the fact that is a stretch. And the SEC in the US is not looking past that. They're like, nah, you're buying stock.
And also,
in this
something that gets me too is like, just because your project says it's a utility token does not mean the SEC is going to see it that way. You can't just say, hey, we're not a security, trust us. Like, it doesn't work like that. Because, it's a big cop out that a lot of these projects are doing. They're going, oh, we're a utility token, because they know utility tokens may or may not be exempt from being classified as securities. But it's not as easy as just saying you're not one.
Yeah, and I'm really interested to see to what degree either the U.S. Kind of adjusts the overall market in terms of how it evolves, or gets left behind because a lot of other countries, like especially led in Europe and Asia, they're okay with the concept of security tokens being made available to the retail public, whereas in the U.S. you have to be eligible as a security and you're only available for private funding. So seeing which way the market goes and what happens to the people that, skirted past all that is going to be really interesting. And these are going to be the catalysts to me that determine, and, fact check me in a few months or a year even, that's going to be determined to me when and what the next alt season looks like. But I don't think you'll just be able to buy old reliable that has pumped 2 or 3 times before and it'll pump again, that type of thing. I think the more mature this ecosystem gets, the more selective we'll have to be fundamentally about what we're buying. And there's a lot of parallels to me. I've been looking back at past crashes. There's a lot of parallels to me to the NASDAQ crash, which if we go full bear, if we don't if we essentially deal with these problems now rather than later, then that could include a full bear scenario. And for the NASDAQ, it took, I don't even know if y'all know, maybe like 12 or 14 years to reach all-time highs again.
Yeah, it's called the lost decade in stocks, where stocks legitimately did nothing over the course of 10 years.
Yeah, so like shrink that down to crypto market cycle size, and maybe we go, in my opinion, for Bitcoin itself, my positive scenario is we break all-time highs within like 6 months. So I've got this thing drawn, a break of the pennant that we're in right now, and this could be gone by the time we even publish. And then there's an ascending triangle potential after that, where essentially we've hit the ceiling on the all-time high a couple times, and maybe we break that by, I think it was like late August. That's like the bullish scenario to me, is we break all-time highs this year. The bearish scenario is like everybody just gets pissed. Like everybody in the community is super salty, and you weed out all of the crap, and only the people left for the long haul are going to be there for the rewards of that uptrend. And that could last well over a year, in my opinion, before we hit new all-time highs on the Bitcoin side of things. And then who knows in terms of the altcoin side of things, that is determined by all these other factors that we've been laying out.
Are there any coins that you are keeping an eye on here that you like, whether it be a chart formation or fundamentally you just think they're really undervalued?
Right now?
I know, it's tough because everything sucks right now. But maybe let's say something you'd feel comfortable with holding maybe like 2 to 3 years.
Besides UBQ.
To be honest, I'm not sure if I lump Ubic into that category of stuff that will last. Like, I've got a position in it. I think it has a use case, and that use case is essentially the fallback for when Ethereum goes proof of stake. There will be proof of work coins that benefit from mining and hash power and potential projects that go that route. If proof of stake blows up, what are the insurance policies? That's an insurance policy. Ethereum Classic's an insurance policy. There's a whole world of insurance policies for Ethereum blowing up that are basically betting on the fact that Ethereum might be Netscape, and who's going to be Firefox, who's going to be Chrome. And I hate making the web parallels. I do come from that world, but like there are some decent parallels. In terms of today, like what do I think buy and hold for several years? It tough, depends on the man.
It's tough in this market.
I'm not. Right now. I would buy Bitcoin and hold it for several years. I think you can probably look at something like Ethereum. It has a huge network effects advantage. I think Ethereum at $500 could very well seem extremely cheap in 5 years, unless it Netscapes itself.
I think Monero at like 250, 300 is going to look crazy cheap in 3 to 4, even like 2 to 3 years. I think it's going to look ridiculously cheap because I think Monero, in a lot of senses, is sort of a better version of what Bitcoin aims to be in terms of a store of value. It is very decentralized. You don't really have to rely on any one person or any one group. So that's another one that I'm definitely liking long term.
Privacy in general, I think, is a great example because the fact that right now, if I gave a donation Bitcoin address and it was like my primary address, and I wasn't smart and I was essentially putting out an address that was something I'm regularly using, smart people can then do chain analysis and find my whole life, my whole financial life. And that was not intended originally with Bitcoin. Like that's something that came up because of the way people realized the network was working. And the privacy component is going to be important. And if Bitcoin doesn't do that, then there's a huge market for someone to take over the privacy sector. And Killer, I know you love Monero, and I do think that you have great reason to love it because fundamentally, Monero is the leader in my opinion, with Zcash being a close second, but Zcash has a ways to go in terms of the inflation rate and getting people to get over the dev reward and all that kind of stuff.
And I may very well be biased with Monero because Monero, its original pump from like cents to like $14, I think in August of 2016, was the thing that got me into crypto. I read an article about it on Bloomberg and I was like, oh, what a great idea, like a privacy coin that's pumping. And that's like what really got me interested. So I could very well like it more than I should. And that's something people have to keep in mind too, is like you got to constantly analyze your own biases.
I think Monero is a great coin. You know, I capitulated. I'll admit, I capitulated
Me
on
too.
a Monero position today.
Not today.
So I may look at that a year from now, and if I didn't get back in, like if it went to from point whatever I sold it at 028, 029, and if I don't get back in, and then down the road Monero's at like 0.1 Bitcoin, I'm going to be salty. But the market cycle is king. The market cycle is king, and Monero had a fake out breakout of that all-time high, and it was a little too scary for me.
That was vicious.
And I had two positions. So
I was playing that.
Yeah, on the whole, I did okay. I had a margin position that I won on, and I had a spot position that I lost on because I entered it later. And so today I gave up on the spot, and make fun of me a week from now, whatever you want to do.
This is one of the things I think you don't really see it talked about a lot with people on Twitter, but I've really come to love it, and I do it a bit myself. So when there's, you want to hold something and it's a spot position, say Monero, and you aren't really sure though, maybe Monero isn't the best example. Maybe let's go to Ether Classic just because there's more availability. So with Ethereum Classic, you can go on OKX, you can trade the US dollar contracts, and then you can go on to Bitmex and you can trade the Bitcoin pairing contracts. So there's some really neat things happening in the market, I find, for exchanges where, if you have something you really like and maybe it's a bigger coin, so it has this kind of exposure to different futures contracts, there's some nice methods if you want to try hedging too, right? So, something to keep in mind for the people if they, have a bigger coin that they like, a bigger market cap coin, and they don't necessarily want to sell, look into ways that you can hedge it in your portfolio because, there's lots of ways.
Yeah. And traditional markets are so much more advanced in terms of creating different investment strategies and being able to blend those together to minimize your risks while also maintaining a significant position. So like you can, the concept of options or like buying naked put, like all these things like that you can do in a traditional market that we don't have yet. And I think one of the advantages a new investor could gain would be that eventually we will get these things. Like these things will come to crypto too. And if you learn up on how to play those markets in the traditional markets, I think it'll be similar to what we've seen so far, that when a new product comes along that you can invest in, you can take advantage of it while it's nascent in crypto, even though it's mature in traditional markets. So if you learn the fundamentals of investing a variety of different types of products in the traditional markets, I think that will benefit you in an extreme way in the long term in the crypto markets, which should maintain a higher degree of volatility for a good ways going forward.
Absolutely. I think, and this is another thing, the markets get like this, it kind of sucks for, a majority of us. It's, obviously some people are having a heyday in these markets and they're just loving it. But I think, when it gets like this,
Hate
the best
those
thing,
people.
at least, they're having fun. We're not. But the best thing to me for myself, what I want to do when the markets get like this is I'm just working on new strategies. I'm just trying to develop new plans of attack. How can I go about this? How can I, try and protect my portfolio in a sense? Where can I maybe do some insurance type things? So to me, when the market gets like this, everybody gets really grumpy, but it's almost, to me, it's a blessing because now I got time to sit down and actually, thoroughly test out some different strategies. And when things are going in full bull mode, you don't always got that, I guess, the attention to want to do those strategies because, everything's just coming so easily.
Yeah, you're just living the dream.
It's made me think of like diversifying my sources of income too, with passive income, mining, masternodes, things like that. So, and I would never feel forced to do that if we were still in a raging bull market because there's no need to. But it's really a healthy thing to do long term.
Yeah, mining is fascinating right now. I mean, there's so many more people getting involved in it, and from what I've heard in terms of Bitcoin mining specifically, I think the GPU market, you can really exploit stuff still and find new coins and new projects. The Bitcoin market though, like you buy some S9s or whatever, the return you were getting on those a month ago versus the returns you get on those now is drastically lower because there's so many new people entering, and the price that goes down along with that. All these things, your profitability is lower. But if you can find your angle, then I totally agree with you, Killer, that you can find some really interesting strategies to make money in any market, and that's why Wall Street's still here. They get cocky in bull markets too. Like, this isn't new to crypto, but Wall Street's better than a retail investor in terms of finding the angle. So I think one of the ways, and a lot of your most successful guests that you've had on that I look up to, they've found their angle, and I think there's massive value there.
Absolutely.
Well, Ledger, anything? I think we'll start wrapping up here. Any final parting words you got for us or listeners?
We're not doing bullish or bearish or over under type stuff, man. I was looking at charts, like feeling the heat.
Dude,
like y'all are going to ask me, is Monero going to be $1,000?
Bullish.
Bullish. No. Did you want to shill your website and I know you're kind of starting a new learning tool. Did you want to talk about that? Real quick
Yeah,
while
give
we're
that a
wrapping up?
shout out for the listeners.
Yeah, so it's been a little slower going than I would like. All these elements of setting up the business entities and getting the initial materials has taken longer than I wanted to, but it's getting there. So I've got this thing I've been creating. It's really not super different from what you may have seen in traditional markets or forex markets. If you go to ledgerstatus.com/learn, it's essentially a yearly membership to get access to learning materials, video and text, market analysis, and chat as well for a relatively reasonable yearly fee. And then that's launching very soon. So I've got a lot of people that have been interested in it, at least when the market was better. But I'm trying to make sure that those materials are really good. And essentially, I want to make it to where instead of spending 1,000 hours or whatever it takes to like weed through crypto Twitter and all the crap that exists in the world, and like finally after so much time of feeling like you got nowhere, for someone to be able to skip through all that. And I've curated what I've learned, and I'm not trying to say like I have the world of experience and I've made it. If I made it, I'd be on my freaking yacht. I wouldn't be making Ledger Status Learn.
Sharing your knowledge, though.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in the fact that you can share what you've learned because you're always a step or two or three ahead of the person that's newer to the market than you. And my aim is to share as best that I can what I've learned over the past year in crypto and however many years in addition to that, investing in general, so that I can give people a head start for getting going in their crypto journey and learning. So if you go to ledgerstatus.com/learn, then you can get in a better idea for what that is and sign up for the forum. I'll send you an email whenever it's ready.
Nice. Love it.
Yeah, and if you're listening and contemplating this, I get a lot of messages on how to get better on TA. I always send them to your YouTube, also Ledger. So this would be something if you're listening and have sent me a message and you want to get better at TA or whatever the case, that's definitely can vouch for the Ledger that he knows his business, and it would be a great class. So hell, I might
thanks. I
even
appreciate
sign
that
up for it.
And what y'all been putting together with well reports has been really interesting, by the way.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, I was going to say, did you see my bold prediction last issue? UBQ will be in the top 10 market cap by the end of the year.
I did see it, and I laughed.
There's a reason it's a bold prediction.
I think
right?
I laughed out loud. So
Did
I
you,
think
you
I
probably
put a bold
laughed at
prediction out
Prince's too.
about Bitcoin private would be like the number one privacy coin. And I didn't even think it was going to be actually taken seriously. And
You got
used
some
as
heat
the
for that,
quote.
bro.
Oh, I got so much heat for it. And it was like, man, guys, I was joking in the chat. It was like, I didn't mean to say that. Like, don't put that down. Like, but of course, it still gets put down in the first release. And I got people tweeting at
well,
me about
the
it.
information. I think what we're talking about is important. That the information gap is humongous in this market because people say, "How do I figure this out?" And the answer is crypto Twitter and go, learn from a bunch of PayPay avatars. No offense to the PayPay avatars. It's like that's just not going to cut it for like your newer retail or like seasoned investors. They're coming to the market and trying to get a grasp of what's going on here. And I think people that are putting out information, educational, news, trade, otherwise, I think there's going to be lasting value there. So I'm attacking that. I know y'all are attacking that from a different angle, and I'm really happy to see that. So props to you on what you're doing. And I was chatting with Dale about how we can be frenemies, and like maybe we'll compete for podcast listeners. And y'all are destroying me, I'm pretty sure. But we can compete for who's going to listen to whose podcast. I hope they listen to both. And
I do too. I think both of them have. Can definitely add value.
Oh, absolutely. They're different styles, right? So that's what I think. I think there's value in
Ledger is
too.
legitimately one of the better chartists like in crypto. So I know I'm not just saying, I'm not using hyperbole. That's absolutely a fact. So give this guy a follow at the very least and follow all of his content for sure.
Well, I appreciate that. And it's been a lot of fun. It's been fun learning about this market.
Yeah, for sure. So thank you very much, Ledger. Check him out, Twitter, Ledger Status, or his website's ledgerstatus.com. Correct? So, all right, everyone, thanks for listening. Remember, pay your taxes, tip your waitress. Peace out.